first of all, what happens sort of regardless of the decisions that these sort of international bodies that regulate currencies are making, what happens with things like trade that my partner talks about, and second of all, what kinds of decisions get made in these international bodies, are they better or worse for sort of the economies as a whole. But first, before I get into that, I want to quickly rebut sort of the principled argument, the first argument that's coming out of opposing government, and that's this idea of like, oh, it's not democratic. Right? I think this is a very strange conception of democracy they're giving you. Democracy doesn't mean you get your way all the time. Democracy means that sometimes you don't get your way. Right? Just because Greece isn't always going to be able to like have the monetary policy it wants, doesn't mean it's not democratic, right? The Democrats aren't getting what they want in Congress right now. That doesn't mean well, there's some other reasons the U.S. might not be a democracy right now, but like that's separate. Okay. So getting into my two main points. First of all, about how I think Emery gives you some really good analysis about how this fosters international trade. Because you're better able to sort of trade within borders, and you're better able to negotiate outside of your union. The only real response we get is that like things like open borders can solve. You can still negotiate with. You can still like have the European Union negotiate trade deals. We don't think this is necessarily true, right? It would be a massively complicated trade deal, because trade deals are not just like, oh, we're just going to have like totally open borders and no tariffs or whatever, right? They're complicated documents that, and you need to have sort of a single exchange rate within that body. If you're the complications that you would have in like trying to negotiate a trade deal, where there were all sorts of different currencies, where you had the drachma and the Deutschmark and the franc, would be like absurd. You could never like hash that out. We think that it's really important for countries like Greece to be able to join these trade unions, so they can then export their goods across the world. Right? We think that that's like really important for, if you want to talk about like propping up these small economies, that's what we need to do, right? We need Greece to be able to export its goods everywhere, not just like to like its immediately neighboring states. We think that's really good. I'll get to it in a minute. Right, and second of all, we get this idea that like, like open border solves, you can still like have like common like regulations. We don't think this is necessarily true. We think that a single currency makes it a lot easier to negotiate sort of collective labor standards. Things like a minimum wage throughout like the EU don't make sense unless you're going to have a single currency. Right, and you can't have like it's ridiculous to say you should have like a certain labor a certain amount of like hours in a like work week if like work is valued differently in different places in the EU. Right, we need this if we're going to have the same sort of integration that you're going to get with a common currency. We think this creates really important benefits, really tangible benefits in that. It lets these countries sort of export their products. It lets them maintain their industrial base in a way that they wouldn't. It lets them maintain their in the way that they wouldn't without like dramatically reducing their labor standards, which we think would be really bad. We think that's really important in this debate. We also think, I'll get to it.
Right, but trade deals also institute labor and environmental standards, and there are hundreds of trade deals that exist between countries who don't have a common currency. So why does this argument make sense?
Because well, certainly there are trade deals that exist without common currency. We think that it makes it significantly easier to negotiate them when you have increased similarities within a certain economic bloc. I think Emery gave you a really good some really good analysis about why when you say it's like, oh, it's just this arbitrary union, right? No, they're very similar economies, and there are like regulations in place that like maintain that similarity. We think that's really good. We think this sort of similarity is what allows for these trade deals. We think that's really important. Finally, I think that moving on to the moving on to the idea about what sort of decisions are these like international bodies going to make versus what sort of decisions are these like individual countries going to make. I think that like the analysis we get out of CG is like kind of they're not really giving Greece good advice here, right? When they're saying like, oh, we should just like Emery's problem with the drachma wasn't that it's like an old currency. It was like her problem with it was that you're like just telling them to like print a ton of it, which is going to create hyperinflation, which is going to tank wages. It's not a like valuable way to solve your economy. And actually, we think that we think Greece would be like incentivized to do that in their world. They would go the way of a country like Zimbabwe or Venezuela, where they just like print a ton of their currency and just sort of try and relieve their debt. When like in the long term, that's going to make things much harder. Well, they're only just like trying to maintain like yeah, it's going to make things harder in the long run rather than just like getting them elected in the short term, right? But also, we think that a lot of the government teams miss an important comparative in this debate because not all like, countries that aren't part of a monetary union have their own currency. Right? A lot of countries are pressured into, because their currency can't compete on the global scale, they have to adopt a country of like the dollar. And that means that you don't have any of these decisions, you don't have any say in any of these decisions. That was disastrous for Argentina because when Argentina's economy collapsed, they didn't have any of the options that they like want you to take, and they didn't have Germany to come and bail them out. And like their economy is like totally in the shambles right now. That's a huge problem. So we don't necessarily think that they're even getting to make these decisions. But even if like you buy that Greece will have its own currency, we don't think that the decisions that they're going to make are going to be better decisions, right? We already talked about how you're incentivized to make short-term decisions, short-term, like very selfish decisions, right? You're going to debase your currency, and that's going to create pressure for other countries to debase their currency. That's going to create this whole collective action problem. It's going to decrease wages. It's going to just lead to a lower overall standard of living, lead to more unemployment. That's what we stand for in this debate. We stand for higher wages, better labor standards. We stand for better decisions made by monetary bodies and increased trade that's going to facilitate all of that. It's going to help out these small countries as well as the big ones. Very proud to oppose.